nirasya sarva sandeham akikritya sudarshanam prakashita rahasyam tam bhajami gurumishwaram nam namashrestam manumapi shachiputramatra swarupam rupam tasyagrajamaruparim maturim goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaramaho Radhikamadavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Shri Govinda Pararavinda Marupananya Vidashojitan Purna Prema Rasotsavo Jalamano Vritti Prasannananan Shajvad Krishna Katha Mahamrita Payo Rasha Mudoke Dato Bande Bhagavatani Mananulavam Murdna Nipatyakshito Namo Mahavaranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tvishe Namah Jayatam Suruto Pangor Mama Mandamate Gati Matsarvasva Parambojo Radha Madana Mohano Kulari Devatamar Madana Mohan Jar Seva Raghunatha Rup Sanatan Jaya Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath Echai Goshai Kori Charana Bandhan Jaha Hoite Vignanasha Bhishta Puran Adadana-strinam Dantoyir Yacheham Puna Puna Srimad Rupa Parambhojo Dhulisyam Janma Janmani. So by the grace of Shri Kali Yuga Pavana, the Svabhajana Vibhajana, Prayojana Avatar, Prema Purushottam, Karuna Mahasagar, Shri Gauranga Mahaprabhu, and his beloved Parshad, the crest jewel of Gaudiya Vaishnavacharyas, the fulfiller of his heart's desire in this world, Sri Rupa Gosvami Pad. Again, today we will discuss Padyavali. And today we're continuing through the Nam Mahatmya Prakaran, the section on the greatness of Sri Hari's name. And we come to a verse from Lakshmidhar, the author of the Bhagavan Nam Kaumudi. We've already heard from him earlier, and now we have another verse from him, which is also cited in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So today, this verse will be our topic of discussion. Having thus cited this verse, which indicates the name is the most gracious and accessible aspect of Sri Bhagavan, and thus worthy of the highest adoration from jivas conditioned in samsara, the compiler next cites a verse that demonstrates how the name is a remover of all sin, even in the absence of a chanter's absorption in sadhana. So in other words, even if the mind is distracted, even if one is not able to engage in sadhana in an ideal manner, still the name can uplift such a person. So how that is so will be explained. ākṛṣṭiḥ kṛta-cetasāṁ sumahatām uccāṭanaṁ cāṁhasām ācaṇḍālam amūka-loka-sulabho vaśyaś mokṣa-śriyaḥ no dīkṣāṁ na ca dakṣiṇāṁ na puraścaryāṁ manāg īkṣate mantro'yaṁ rasanā-spṛg phalati śrī-kṛṣṇa-nāmātmakaḥ. Attractive even to those of purified mind, destructive of even extremely severe sins, easily available to all people who are not mute, including even caṇḍālas, and subduing of the fortune of moksha. This mantra comprised of Sri Krishna's name considers neither dīkṣā, nor dakṣiṇā, nor puraścaryāṁ in the least, and bears fruit just by touching the tongue. So what the commentator introduced by saying even if the sadhaka is not absorbed is specifically referring to this final point, that the name bears fruit just by touching the tongue, means even if the mind is elsewhere, still there is benefit in chanting. Although of course attentive chanting is ideal, nevertheless, this is the point being made to stress the purifying power, the greatness of the name. So that will come ahead. This quote, this mantra comprised of Sri Krishna's name indicates that the name of Sri Krishna, be it the name Krishna specifically, or other names of Sri Krishna, like Hari and Govinda, is comparable to a mantra, insofar as it is something that is capable of highly benefiting those who chant it. So when he says this mantra comprised of Sri Krishna's name, it's a roundabout way of just saying Krishna's name. In other words, he's not talking about the Gopal mantra or a mantra that contains Krishna's name along with other words. He's just talking about Krishna's name, and he's speaking of it in a way so as to convey high regard for it by comparing the name alone to a mantra, drawing on the conventional understanding that chanting a mantra is beneficial. It has some mysterious effect. So this name alone is effective the way a mantra is. Oh wow! From a simplistic attitude, this is the added way that he's showing honor to the name by describing it like that. So in this regard, it is stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the name is the best of all mantras. This is the essence of the Shastra. So this is just cited here to stress the idea that the name is sometimes compared to a mantra, and not only compared to a mantra, but when it's compared to a mantra, it's said to be the best of mantras. So we'll get on to further discussion of the relationship between mantras and the name a little bit ahead. So just bear that in mind. That the name, quote, bears fruit just by touching the tongue, rasanā-spṛg phalati, means it manifests its own effect, and it does not require purity of the body or other particular external conditions for this effect to become manifest, as is described in the Vishnu Dharma Puran. Quote, O hunter, there is no regulation regarding place, no regulation regarding time, and no prohibition in regard to remnants and the like, that is, in regard to purity of the body and so forth. So we'll discuss this topic in further detail when we get to verse 31, which is otherwise known as the second verse of the Shikshastakam. So I won't elaborate on this here because we'll elaborate on it there. But the point is the same, that to say that it works just by touching the tongue means it's not that you have to bathe before you chant, or it's not that you have to chant it only at a certain time of the day or on a certain titi of the month, or only after being in a certain state of ritual purity, or all of these kind of things. Moreover, the name does not depend on being recited by rote, being sung in a fine tune, or anything of the sort. It produces its effect like nectar consumed unintentionally. Meaning, in a modern context, we might just use medicine as an example. As nectar leads to rejuvenation and long life, regardless of the mentality of the person who drinks it, so the name benefits a chanter irrespective of the chanter's state of mind. So this is what the author wants to stress. But from the discussion that will come ahead, and which has been touched on a little bit before, you might wonder, well, what about aparad? If someone is, has aparad in their mind, then will the name work? Just as we were talking about namabas the other day, if according to Jiva Gosvami's viewpoint, when the name is spoken with an intention to disrespect Bhagavan, then the effect is not going to come. But here he's saying it comes just by touching the tongue. So this is an apparent difference. So to resolve that, we can say that this principle here, that it works just by touching the tongue, is true, but not absolute. It does work, whatever the case may be, but which effect will come about depends on still the state of the mind. And you could also say that same point with nectar or medicine, that if you give someone a certain medicine, it will work on them regardless of their state of mind, but depending on the exact condition they're in, you might see a different type of response in the body. So similarly, in this regard, it should be noted, however, that in the case of a chanter with an offensive mindset, the benefit that the name will verily produce will initially take shape largely or only as purification of the chanter's offensiveness, as was indicated by Srimad Mahaprabhu by describing purification of the mind as the first effect of Sri Krishna Sankirtan in the opening verse of his Shikshastakam cited earlier here in Padyavali verse 22. Once that purification is entirely or largely completed, then the other benefits the name is known to produce will be observable. To emphasize the degree to which the name, that should be thus, invariably benefits those who chant it irrespective of their state of mind, yet also benefits them in accord with their state of mind, various praises of the name are stated in this verse. So, attractive to those of purified mind, ākṛṣṭiḥ kṛta-cetasāṁ indicates that the name attracts even the minds of mahats towards itself. That is, the name induces them to chant itself perpetually. In this regard, the compiler has described the name in his Namastakam as, quote, worshipable even to legions of the liberated. So, it's not that the name is just some method for those who are fallen and conditioned in samsara to become liberated or to become enlightened, and then after they become enlightened and liberated, then they discard this name. Rather, once the mind is completely purified, once the person is liberated, then the name is felt to be all the more attractive and relishable and continues to be adored. Destructive of even extremely severe sins, sumahatām, uccāṭanaṁ, caṇḍālam, indicates that the name can remove even sins that cannot be eradicated by austerity, charity, and other conventional forms of atonement. As is described in Srimad Bhagavatam, quote, a thief, a drunkard, a betrayer of a friend, a murderer of a brahmana, one who goes to the Guru's bed, that is, one who engages in adultery with the Guru's wife, a murderer of a woman, a king, a father or a cow, and other sinners. This utterance of the name of Vishnu is the best means of atonement, even for all of these sinners, because one, that is, anyone who utters his name, becomes an object of his attention as a result of chanting his name. So the source of all purification is Bhagavan. By chanting the name of Bhagavan, the attention of Bhagavan comes upon someone, the purifying presence of Bhagavan comes upon someone. So for those all who've committed very severe sins, so the first half of this passage refers to many of the most severe of the various sins that can be committed, and it says that of all means of atoning for such severe sins, the chanting of the name is the best. So this reinforces the idea that it can purify one of sin more so than even other forms of atonement, or it's the supreme atonement. Now, of course, that doesn't mean to chant the name using it as an atonement, because that's also a type of namaparad, as we'll discuss soon. But nevertheless, to show the greatness of the name, this point is made, that it has the power to destroy even extreme sins. Some interpret the word sumahatām in this verse under discussion as a qualifier of kṛta-cetasāṁ rather than of caṇḍālam. In this case, the meaning becomes that the name is, quote, attractive even to those of purified mind who are highly exalted and destructive of sins. So, not a significant difference in meaning. The name is described as, quote, easily available to all people who are not mute, including even caṇḍālas, to indicate that utterance of the name, unlike other practices of bhakti, can easily be done by all people, save for those who are mute, including even the most uncultured of human beings. Like bathing in the Ganges during the month of Magh, it is something that all have eligibility and opportunity to do. So this is clear. You don't even have to get up. You can be seated, you could be lying down, you could be in any sort of condition. There's not many things that are easier to do than simply move your lips or move your tongue. You don't even, as we say in English, you don't even have to raise a finger. So it's such a highly purifying practice, and yet it can be performed with such ease and in a manner that nearly anyone can do, from a very elderly person to a child, etc. So it's of universal applicability. The name is said to be, quote, subduing of the fortune of liberation, because those who chant the name with the aim of attaining moksha succeed in achieving this aim, and those who chant the name as an act of bhakti only for the pleasure of Sri Bhagavan automatically attain moksha even without seeking it. So in either case, moksha can be, quote, subdued. In other words, it can be brought into one's subject, made subject to oneself, or as we heard earlier, moksha can come like a maidservant and bow before you and say, may I serve you? So the name, or bhakti in general, has such power. So now we come to the second half of the verse, and this is where perhaps the most well-known statement in this verse comes up, which is sometimes a matter of, I won't say debate, but sometimes discussion arises about what's the intended sense here. So I've tried, with reference to the works of Jiva Gosvami and others, to shed some light on the intention of what's said here in the third line of the verse. So, after commenting on the first half of the verse, the commentator raises the consideration that after hearing the description of the name given in the first half of the verse, a listener may contemplate the significance of the description and compare it to descriptions given of the Gopal mantra and other mantras related to Śrī-kṛṣṇa. Upon doing so, a listener may conclude that these mantras also have the same qualities that the name has been said to possess thus far in the verse. In other words, an educated person who's studied Shastra, who knows also what the Gopal mantra, what other Krishna mantras are said to have the power to do, if they hear these descriptions, then they may say, well, the Gopal mantra also can do all of this. So you're saying the name can do this, elsewhere we hear the Gopal mantra can do this. So the listener may wonder if there is any significant distinction between the name of Krishna and mantras related to Krishna. So does it matter then? Can we just chant the name? Is it better to chant a mantra? Is there any significant difference between the effect of the two? To clarify this, the commentator reasons, the third line in the verse states that the name, quote, considers neither dīkṣā nor dakṣiṇā nor puraścaryāṁ in the least. So this is how the commentator frames the purpose that the author has for saying what he says in the third line, or why is he raising this point about the name not being dependent on these things. Then this is his suggestion as to why that would be. Whatever the case may be, the author wants to make this point known. So we'll look a little bit at the definition of these terms, and then we'll look a bit at how Jiva Gosvami has analyzed this topic. So, the term Dīkṣā refers to acceptance of a mantra from a blessed guru, preceded by formation of a resolve or sankalpa to meditate on the mantra as directed by the guru. The following definition of Dīkṣā from the Agama Shastra is cited by Sri Sanatana Pad in Hari Bhakti Vilas and Sri Jiva Pad in Bhakti Sandarbha. Quote, because it can grant divine knowledge and completely destroy sin, it is called Dīkṣā by preceptors learned in the truth. Therefore, prostrating in this way to the Guru and offering him one's all, one should accept a Vaishnava mantra and the rite of Dīkṣā according to rule. Sri Jiva Pad comments in this regard that, quote, divine knowledge, or divyam jnanam, refers to knowledge of the identity of Sri Bhagavan in the blessed mantra, and therewith knowledge of a specific relationship between oneself and Bhagavan. So the Dīkṣā is saying it can grant divine knowledge, it can destroy sin. So what is this divine knowledge that can be granted by it? It can make known the devata of the mantra, or in this case of a Krishna mantra, it can produce knowledge of the identity of Sri Bhagavan in the mantra. So we cited a verse earlier in a commentary where it explained that the Guru, the mantra, and the devata are all one. The devata appears in the form of the Guru, the devata appears in the form of the mantra, and by following the Guru, by chanting the mantra, one can ultimately have realization of the devata. So the same concept is being referred to here, that by chanting the mantra, one can come to have knowledge of the devata of the mantra, or the identity of Bhagavan, whose name is this core feature of the mantra into which one receives Dīkṣā. And moreover, perhaps most significant here, is the additional point he makes, that not only does one acquire knowledge or awareness of Bhagavan, but one acquires a knowledge of him and a specific relationship between oneself and him. So this exact topic we're going to refer back to later. So bear that in mind. Initially, we're just introducing the terms and their definitions, and then we'll get into analysis. The term dakṣiṇā in this verse, under discussion, refers to the donation, offering, or fee given to the Guru that is a customary part of the rite of Dīkṣā. In some editions of Padyavali, including that of the commentator, and in the citations of the verse under discussion in some editions of Chaitanya Charitamrita, the variant sat-kriyaṁ is found in place of dakṣiṇā. The commentator glosses sat-kriyaṁ, or right action, as a collective term for compulsory duties, incidental duties, and other activities performed for the purpose of purification of the psyche. Others take sat-kriyaṁ to refer in general to right conduct or sadachar, that is, the conduct enjoined in the Shastra. The term puraścaryāṁ, or literally that which is to be performed before, a synonym of which is puraścarana, refers to dedicated performance for a fixed period of time prior to the acceptance of Dīkṣā of 5 activities, namely mantra meditation, japa, fire sacrifice, homa, oblations, tarpana, ritual bathing of a devata, abhishek, and feeding brahmanas. Sri Sanatana Pad cites the following explanation of puraścarana from Agastya Samhita in Hari Bhakti Vilas. Quote, worship consisting of 5 parts performed by bhaktas is called puraścarana. Daily ritual worship 3 times a day, japa, oblations, fire sacrifice, and feeding of brahmanas is called puraścarana. For the purpose of sanctification or siddhi of the mantra received by the grace of the Guru at the time of Dīkṣā, this worship, consisting of 5 parts, is performed beforehand according to rule. That is, because performance of this rite containing 5 parts is done before, or puras, receiving one's desired mantra by the grace of the Guru at the time of Dīkṣā, it is called puraścaryāṁ, or that which is performed before. And this point in here where he says that the purpose of it is to sanctify the mantra, that is a general statement, but he also explains in Hari Bhakti Vilas that in the case of the Gopal mantra and Krishna mantra, in general, there is no need of such sanctification because they contain names of Krishna. They're already or sacred or sanctified in and of themselves. So, in the case of the Gopal mantra, such a process is not compulsory, although it may be performed by some. And we hear that, for example, Rupa Sanatana performed a type of puraścaryāṁ before receiving Dīkṣā. The name is said in the verse under discussion to not consider Dīkṣā, dakṣiṇā, or satkriya, or puraścaryāṁ, so as to indicate that the name is a favorer of all who hear it, read it, or somehow or other cognize it, irrespective of whether they have received Dīkṣā, offered dakṣiṇā, or performed puraścaryāṁ or satkriya. Further, the name is said to not consider these things, quote, in the least, or manāg, to indicate that the name is fully capable of purifying and benefiting all living beings in all circumstances by virtue of its own inherent potency, which does not rely on anything apart from itself to be effective. So Bhagavan is supremely purifying more so than anything else. Bhagavan's name is none different than him. Therefore, there's nothing more purifying than the name. So, the name is more purifying than austerities or charity or these various other rites. So now we're going to get into some of the finer analysis. Sri Jiva affirms in Bhakti Sandarbha 284 that the name of Sri Bhagavan is non-dependent on Dīkṣā to be effective, and has the ability to grant results that include even the supreme Purushartha. Thus, although the name of Sri Krishna and Krishna mantras, that is, mantras containing names of Sri Krishna, such as the 10 and 18 syllable Gopal mantras, both have all the qualities mentioned in the first 2 lines of the verse, and are equal in terms of the results they can ultimately grant, insofar as they can both be means to the attainment of all Purusharthas, including Krishna Prema in general. The author shows a distinction between them with respect to Dīkṣā, dakṣiṇā, and puraścaryāṁ, being required in the case of Krishna mantras, but not being required in the case of Krishna's names. So this is, you could say, the general idea that one will acquire from the verse, the way it's written. So now the commentator passes a remark on this statement of the author. He says, the commentator attributes this remark in the verse, stressing a distinction between the name of Sri Krishna and Krishna mantras on the basis of respective non-dependence and dependence upon Dīkṣā to boldness on the author's part, stemming from extreme one-pointedness upon the name of Sri Krishna. In other words, he's respectfully saying, this is a little overboard, or this is a bit of an extreme remark. So, this analysis of the commentator, spoiler alert, I'm going to go through various passages of Jiva Gosvami and other word statements of Sanatana Gosvami, and ultimately, I support the commentator's viewpoint. But why? That's what's important to understand. So we'll get to that as we go. As per Sri Jivapad's analysis of the subject in Bhakti Sandarbha 284, moreover, the idea that only Krishna's name is non-dependent on Dīkṣā, and Krishna mantras rather are entirely dependent on Dīkṣā, is not entirely accurate. So, a conventional or a common idea is that the mantras are entirely dependent on Dīkṣā, and they won't work unless you receive Dīkṣā. So Jiva Gosvami doesn't entirely agree with that. So his analysis is fine in this regard and is as follows. A question is raised. Well, mantras are certainly comprised of Bhagavan's names, with the distinction therein, that is between mantras and Bhagavan's names, being that they, the mantras, are ornamented with the word namaha, obeisance, and so forth, meaning svaha or other bijas and so forth, are imbued with special shakti by Sri Bhagavan and blessed rishis, and are establishers of a special relationship of the self with Sri Bhagavan. Okay, so this is important to note. Jiva Goswami is saying that the mantras are more than Bhagavan's names. Why? Because what's in the mantras? Bhagavan's names. So you've got nothing less, you've got the names just like the names are, but in addition to that, you have Shakti that's imbued into these mantras by Bhagavan or by rishis. You've got additional words which ornament the presence of those names, and you have a function by which a particular relationship with Bhagavan is established. In this regard, even Sri Bhagavan's names alone, that is, his names not in conjunction with the ornamental words, special potency, and so forth found in mantras, are verily independent and capable of bestowing results, including even the supreme Purushartha. So although the names don't have that, it doesn't mean that they're ineffective or that they're deficient. One can still achieve Krishna Prem with the name, or a variety of moksha, depending on your interest. So the question is as follows. Why is there a dependence upon Dīkṣā and so forth in regard to mantras, which are possessed of greater capability than even the name? So if the mantras have more shakti than the names, and for the names to work you don't need Dīkṣā, then why do you need Dīkṣā for the mantras? You would think that the thing that has more power would be less dependent on something else. So that's the question. Now here's Jiva Goswami's answer. It is said in response to this question that although there is none, repeat, although there is none, that is, no such dependence of mantras upon Dīkṣā and so forth. So now he's saying, nope, mantras also don't require Dīkṣā. But now read carefully. He's giving a particular reason or a particular aspect of non-dependence. So he's saying, although there is none in relation to the essential nature of the mantras. So yes, the mantra on its own, it has the power to work, whether the person has Dīkṣā or not. In that sense, there's no necessity of Dīkṣā because the mantra certainly has the power to do or produce the desired effect. Hold that thought. Still, here on the path of archana, there is, in certain respects, some type of protocol established by the blessed seers and others for persons naturally possessed of aimless or troublesome behavior and a distracted mind, on account of relation with the body and so forth, for the sake of curbing these, that is, such unfavorable physical and mental tendencies. So, Archan is Dīkṣā is part of, or a subpart of, the process of Archan, ritual worship. And to perform ritual worship, if one has a distracted mind, or one isn't able to regulate one's behavior, then one won't be able to do it properly. So, there is a protocol established about how the Archan is to be performed. And that protocol is for the purpose of helping people deal with the complexities of embodiment, or in other words, the challenge of simply effectively keeping the body and mind at peace and focused on what it is that you want them to do. Thus, Shastra prescribes atonement in the case of transgression of this, that is, of the established protocol in relation to archan of accepting dīkṣā. So, the process of dīkṣā produces or supports the disciplining of one's behavior and this curbing or this, disciplining of one's, mind and body. So because it's conducive or it's supportive to negating these troublesome challenges that are part of the spiritual journey the person is following, according to this path of archan, there is a compulsoriness of dīkṣā. So he's saying that the compulsoriness of the dīkṣā is not based on the need for the right for the mantra to work, rather it's compulsory for the recipient to sufficiently be, regulated or sufficiently be disciplined such that they can be subjected to the power and effect of the name and the other practices of bhakti. So this is a subtle distinction. In other words, he's saying the mantra doesn't need dīkṣā for it to work, but the sadhaka needs dīkṣā for him to be worked over, if you will. Or her, whatever the case may be. Thus, neither is unreasonable. That is, thus mantras, being non-dependent upon dīkṣā, by virtue of their essential nature is reasonable, and their requiring dīkṣā for the purpose of efficiently curbing unfavorable physical and mental behavior is also reasonable. That's not necessary. And in this way, therein, that is in regard to the names of Bhagavan and mantras comprised of names of Bhagavan, there is no dependence fundamentally of either of them upon dīkṣā. From this passage, it can be understood that in principle, with respect to the essential nature of mantras that are comprised of Sri Bhagavan's names, and imbued with special potency by Sri Bhagavan or particular rishis, there is no lack of purifying potency within them that leaves them incapable of producing their effects in persons who chant them even without dīkṣā. Since even Sri Bhagavan's names alone have such potency, and thus mantras which contain those names and are imbued with added potency undoubtedly have even greater thoroughly sufficient capability. Sri Jiva cites a number of verses in the aforecited Anucheda in Bhakti Sandarbha to demonstrate that Krishna mantras are fundamentally non-dependent on dīkṣā, such as the following, quote, among all classes of mantras of Ganapatyas, Shaivas, Shaktas, and Sauras, Vaishnav mantras are said to be the best fulfillers of desires. O best of Brahmanas, even among Vaishnava mantras, Rama mantras have greater results, crores and crores of times greater, than mantras related to Ganesh and others, and verily are bestowers of attainments or siddhis just by means of chanting, indeed without dīkṣā, indeed without puraścaryāṁ, and indeed without the process of nyās. So here you have a clear statement, again saying that Vaishnava mantras do not require dīkṣā. So Sanatana Pad, he elaborates on this topic in Hari Bhakti Vilas by saying that of all Vaishnava mantras, Krishna mantras are the most powerful. In the statement that was just cited before, it was saying that Ram mantras were being praised. So one still might wonder, well, what about Ram mantras and Krishna mantras? Are they of equal value? Are they of different value? So Sanatana Pad discusses that. Mantras related to Krishna Deva, that is, Bhagavan Hari himself, he who is the source of all avatars, however, are the most potent of all. Therein, furthermore, the mantras related to him manifesting his own Bhagavatva, that is, his essential nature of being Bhagavan, by means of his lila as a cowherd, are the best of all. And even among those, the 18-syllable mantra, that is the Gopal mantra, is the very best of all. So this is what he writes these are statements of Sanatan in the Mool of Hari Bhakti Vilas, and then in his Tika he elaborates on them as follows. Mantras related to Krishna are the most potent, that is, possessed of the greatest power of all, that is, even more so than all mantras related to Sri Nrsimha, Raghunath, that is Ram, and so on, that is, all other forms of Bhagavan. The cause in this regard is that he, Sri Krishna, is the source of all avatars, as per the statement of his being the avatari in Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna, however, is Bhagavan himself. Therein, even among those mantras related to Daivatas such as Sri Dwarakanath and others, that is, mantras related to various forms of Krishna, those mantras related to him, Krishna Deva specifically, manifesting his own Bhagavata, or essential nature of being Bhagavan, by means of his Leela as a cowherd in the land of Braja, are verily the best of all. And even among those, the 18-syllable mantra known as the Sammohana, or the enchanting one, meaning the Gopal mantra, is the best of all. This is the meaning. So you can sometimes see among some Vaishnavas, and you can even find an instance of it in Chaitanya Charitamrita, interestingly, where Vaishnavas frequently chant the names of Krishna, but then when there's some danger of an accident, or there's a disease, or there's a calamity, then suddenly they start chanting the Nrsimha mantra, or some other mantra, thinking that at the time of the need of acute protection, this other mantra is somehow more apt. And okay, no harm, no foul. But is that necessary? Is that, really crucial? According to this analysis, we could say no. Here, the name of Krishna is supremely potent in all respects, more so than the name of Nrsimha, Ram, any other form of Bhagavan, much less any other Devata. So one can never, fall short or never be lacking in sufficient strength or support by taking shelter in Krishna mantra. Thus, in the case of all mantras related to Sri Bhagavan, and mantras related to Sri Krishna especially, there is no necessity of Dīkṣā for these mantras to produce their effects. And there is similarly no necessity of dakṣiṇā, right conduct, satkriya, sadachar, or puraścaryāṁ in this respect. Moreover, Sri Jiva explains that to attain the purusharthas, there is no necessity of the entire process of archan, of which Dīkṣā is a preliminary part. So not only do you not need Dīkṣā, you don't even need to do archan. Quote, in the view of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is no necessity of the path of archan based on the Pancharatra and other such texts, because of attainment of the purusharthas, even by means of any one limb of bhakti, among the limbs of bhakti such as sharanagati and so forth, even without that is, even without performing archana, being declared, that is, affirmed to occur. So, Jiva Goswami also speaks at length about the process of archan in the Bhakti Sandarbha itself. Rupa Goswami speaks about it, Sanatana Gosvami says so many things. So, it's not that we want to just take this one quote and then say, oh look, archan is unnecessary. He's speaking about a principle here. He's saying, in principle, it's not necessary. It is possible to achieve the purusharthas without it. He's not necessarily saying that it's best for you to neglect it, but he's just saying in principle it's not absolutely required. So, thus, one can attain the purusharthas, including the fifth and ultimate purushartha, Krishna Prema in a general form, without performing archana or accepting Dīkṣā, provided, now this is a big if, one aptly performs some other limb of bhakti, such as sharanagati or chanting Sri Bhagavan's name. So, it's possible, not taking Dīkṣā, not doing so under the guidance of a guru, is it likely that you'll succeed in doing those things? Not highly likely, but it is possible, and we should recognize the possibility. This is the thread of thought here. Thus, the commentator, after explaining the third line in the verse, where it is stated that the name is not dependent upon dīkṣā and so forth to produce its effects, raises the concern that a doubt can arise in this regard. So you might hear all of this and say, okay, if the name doesn't need dīkṣā, you don't even need to do any type of archan, you can achieve the purusharthas just by sharanagati, just by chanting or what have you. So then someone may wonder, well, in that case, the uselessness of accepting a guru and dīkṣā would arise because of the attainment of all results occurring just by independently chanting the name. So the commentator is saying, if you follow the line of thought this far, then you might think, so what's the point of all that? Is it just unnecessary? In response to this doubt, it can be said that although the path of archan and its subparts in the form of dīkṣā, dakṣiṇā, right conduct, and puraścaryāṁ are not absolutely necessary, still, in the vast majority of cases, they are in no way unfavorable for a sadhaka, and rather are highly complementary to limbs of bhakti like sharanagati and chanting Sri Bhagavan's name, because they assist the sadhaka in overcoming challenges that arise from bodily conditioning, which give rise to unfavorable bodily and mental behavior, as was explained by Sri Jiva in the aforesaid passage from Bhakti Sandarbha. So though they're not necessary, they're helpful. Moreover, Sri Rupa in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu mentions receiving instruction from a guru beginning with Krishna mantra Dīkṣā as the second of the three most fundamental limbs of bhakti. An observance of the custom of accepting Dīkṣā from a guru has been very well established in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, that needs an I, from its inception and continuously up to the present. So Sanatana writes about this extensively in Hari Bhakti Vilas. Rupa Goswami writes about it with strong words in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So what we're doing here is recognizing principles, we're understanding subtleties of siddhānta, but we shouldn't necessarily run with the idea of not necessary as to mean not to be done. Sometimes in conventional speech, if some Vaishnavas are working together and they're decorating for an utsav, and then someone comes along and says, oh, can I help? And we say, oh, not necessary, we've got plenty of help. Then the person might think, okay, then what they're saying is I should do something else. Because, in other words, they're politely saying it's not necessary, but actually they're saying, no, like, we don't require your help, and, we'd prefer that you not. So sometimes the usage in colloquial speech of, quote, not necessary means ought not to be done. But in this context, that's not the meaning. Or to say that it's not necessary doesn't mean that it's not valuable, doesn't mean that it's not beneficial, doesn't mean that you do very well to do it. It just means, technically, according to principle, there is a very unlikely potential case of the effect coming about without this. So to be true to form, or to be fully comprehensive in one's discussion of the topic, this admission is stated. It should also be further understood that although limbs of bhakti such as sharanagati and chanting Sri Bhagavan's name, performed in a general manner, can lead to liberation from samsara, the attainment of Sri Bhagavan's abode, and prema for Sri Bhagavan in general, they will not lead to the attainment of a specific form of prema and relationship with a specific form of Bhagavan, such as that of the Madhura Prema of the Brajagopis for Bhagavan Sri Krishna of Gokula, unless they are practiced with such an aim during the stage of sadhana. So now I'm coming to a second reason for the value of Dīkṣā. The first reason is that it's not necessary, but it's helpful. It supports discipline, it supports focus, it supports regulation of one's behavior. So it's beneficial, do it. Now a second reason, perhaps you could say a deeper reason, is being explained here. So Jiva Gosvami speaks about this in Bhakti Sandarbha twice. Quote, although everything is accomplished just by Sharanagati, as per the statement in Garuda Purana, quote, those who have forsaken meditation and yoga and taken shelter in him certainly overcome death and reach that abode of Vishnu. Still, if one is desirous of specificity, that is, a specific form of prema and relationship with a specific form of Sri Bhagavan, and able to pursue such, then one should perform service fixedly and specifically to the feet of a blessed guru, who is a teacher of the Shastras related to Bhagavan, or a teacher of a mantra related to Bhagavan, since his grace is the root cause of the removal of anarthas that are difficult to give up by various countermeasures of one's own, and the root cause of the attainment of the supreme grace of Bhagavan. Moreover, still, even though attainment of the Purusharthas can occur by means of other limbs of bhakti such as Sharanagati, Archan necessarily should be performed after the acceptance of Dīkṣā by those following the path of Narada and others who desire to form a specific relationship with Sri Bhagavan that is established by the feet of the blessed Guru by means of the rite of Dīkṣā. And this is just rendered a little bit literally. I know it sounds a little bit odd to say that a relationship is established by Bhagavan with the feet of the Guru, but in this context, the mention of feet is largely an honorific convention. Not that literally he's, creating something with his toes or something like this. But the point is that the rite of Dīkṣā, as was given in that reference to that original definition of Dīkṣā, which we discussed earlier, which I'm about to mention here, is that it's through the rite of Dīkṣā and the education that's given by the Guru in relation to the Dīkṣā that one acquires specificity in one's spiritual aspiration and one's aim in regard to which form of Bhagavan one shall worship and with what sort of relationship one aspires to have. It is for this reason that Sri Jivapad explained in relation to the definition of the term Dīkṣā cited above that, quote, divine knowledge refers to knowledge of a specific identity of Sri Bhagavan and knowledge of a specific relationship between oneself and that particular form of Sri Bhagavan. In this regard, the commentator, who refers to Bhakti Sandarbha for further understanding of the current topic of discussion, makes mention of the account found in Padma Puran of Sri Narada coming to Vrindavan, accepting mantra Dīkṣā from Sri Lalita Devi, and attaining darshan of Sri Radha and Krishna's amorous play, as an illustration of the necessity of accepting mantra Dīkṣā when a specific spiritual object is sought by a sadhaka. The commentator further states, as a broad summary of the entire topic, that in general there is a greater result produced by chanting the name after Dīkṣā, and thus that chanting the name after Dīkṣā is possessed of a greatness that exceeds that of chanting the name without Dīkṣā. This greater benefit of chanting the name after Dīkṣā can be attributed generally to the benefit Dīkṣā contributes to curbing unfavorable mental and bodily behavior on the part of the sadhaka, and primarily to the higher order of ultimate spiritual attainment a sadhaka can attain as a result of chanting the name with a clear aspiration for a specific relationship with a specific form of Bhagavan established by the Guru through the rite of Dīkṣā. Thus, it should be further understood that to attain a specific form of relationship and prema for Sri Bhagavan, such as a specific relationship and prema for Sri Krishna of Braja, acceptance of Dīkṣā is essential. But to attain general forms of mukti, such as sayujya and salokya, or a non-specific form of prema for Sri Bhagavan, Dīkṣā may be considered non-essential in principle, though nevertheless highly beneficial and thus practically most befitting of acceptance. So that's the cadence, if you will, is that it's recognized to not be in principle absolutely in all cases necessary, but to be in a vast majority of cases highly beneficial, and to be essential in the case of someone who has a specified spiritual aspiration. So finally, this verse was also cited in the Charitamrita, and there it's given a brief Bengali rendering, so that's given as follows. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Mahaprabhu is said to have cited the verse under discussion in a dialogue with inquiring Vaishnavas, and to have summarized its meaning as follows. Quote, "One name of Krishna destroys all sins, and the 9 types of bhakti are completed by chanting of the name." Krishna's name does not depend on dīkṣā, puraścaryāṁ, or right conduct. Just by touching the tongue, it delivers everyone, including even caṇḍālas. As a secondary result, the name causes the sensation of samsara. Primarily, the name attracts the heart and causes the appearance of Krishna prema therein. So, that's all we have on this verse. So, in summary, as we just read a summary here, but the first half of the verse speaks about how the name purifies sin, the name is accessible to practically everyone, the name can lead to moksha, the name is attractive even to liberated souls, and this name doesn't require dīkṣā, dakṣiṇā, or archan or anything. It can benefit anyone just by touching the tongue or just being cognized in any form. So in this way, many greatnesses of the name are expressed in the verse. I'll conclude here. If anyone has comments, questions, corrections, or otherwise, please feel free to share. All right, then, I hope things were clear, and we'll conclude here for today, and perhaps, well, we'll see. Maybe in the next class we'll complete the Nam Mahatmya Prakaran. The final verse is the second verse of the Shikshastakam, and the discussion there will also be a little bit extended, so within 1 or 2 classes we should complete this section of the text. Vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Jai Shri Guru, Jai Shri Gaur, Jai Jai Shri Shri Radhe Shyam.